Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Yeah, I did buy cat food yesterday. I said to Jason, so what do you want to talk about today? And he said, kitty cats. I said, okay, I just bought some cat food. And I noticed that the Sam's Club hires liars now. And they have a claim that if you sign up for their $100 a year membership, you get free shipping. Well, that's not exactly true. Because if you go to Sam's Club and you search on cat food, dry cat food, you'll find that they have it. And some of it they charge you shipping for, even though you have an account with them or a membership with them that says you get free shipping because you spent $100. How about that? Other cat food, they don't charge you for. And they also have different prices. And so when you think of Sam's Club, you think, well, they've got one price for everybody. Well, they have one price if you're going to have it shipped. They have another price if you pick it up in the store. So they lie. Sam's, I'm calling you out. I'm calling out Sam's Club for being liars. How about that? It's absolutely true. So, how do I know? Because I've experienced it. And then they send me these surveys. What do you think about Sam's Club? And I tell them. I tell them exactly what I think. And I really don't like Sam's Club. And if there were an alternative that were viable, I would be there. Jason, thank you for engineering the broadcast today in Minnesota at Genesis Communications Network. Guineith Isaacs is with us across the ocean, live, in the dark, in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Well, I guess, you might say I'm a little frosted. You know what? At the lies, they're everywhere. I mean, you've said it, Rich has said it, Norma's said it, Captain John Reagan said it, I've said it. We've all been saying that people don't tell the truth. They misrepresent. You can't believe anything. And it's absolutely true. Warranties are virtually worthless, virtually. It's awful. Didn't used to be like this. If you bought a Craftsman tool and you broke it, you could bring it back to Sears. They wouldn't put you through the meat grinder and give you a hard time. They'd say, oh, okay, would it be okay if I replace that for you? Now, where do you even find a Sears to return that Craftsman tool? If they still make it. A lot of their part numbers have been replaced with Chi-Com tools with different part numbers. And if you go to the Chinese factory tool outlet like Harbor Freight, they have different part number for the same product every few months. So if you have part number 1, 2, 3 and it breaks and you bring it back and you say it has a lifetime guarantee, well, we don't have that one anymore. They have a different part number. If you buy a tape measure from those hosers, talking about Harbor Freight, their brand, you can stretch that thing out, and with a Stanley tape measure, you might be able to get out 8 feet, and then, without it folding in half. Like if you want to measure a board, just stretch it out, and it'll go out 8 feet, maybe more, maybe 10 feet. Not the Chi-Com ones. Nope. And not only that, the Chi-Com ones don't even want to go back in their holder. Meaning, you pull them out of the case, you stretch it out to use it, and you try to get it back in, and after a while, they don't even want to go back in. Not only that, when they do fold in half, they tend to crack, and you'll slice your finger and bleed like a stuck pig. They make crappy stuff. and they've displaced all but a few of the good tool makers in the United States of America. That's what's happened. Guineith, you want to talk about chickens? You want to talk about the joys of nickel-iron cells in your battery bank? You want to talk about bee swarms? What else would you like to talk about?
I'd like to start with bee swarms because I'm actually feeling. We had a problem yesterday. It started, woke up in the morning and sent the dogs out for the toilet, and one of them came back in with a swollen up face. I thought, wow, what happened to you? It looks like you ate some bees. And this particular dog is probably just under a year old. So he's a pup, and he's still learning about the world. And, I sort of dismissed it and said, oh, well, he's found out that bees don't taste good. Because we have beehives at our place, or we had a beehive. And so we sort of said, well, now you know, don't you? Bees don't taste good. Because this particular one, he had this habit of chasing bees and chasing ants, and was saying, you're going to get stung one day, little guy, But, he didn't listen. He had to learn for himself. And so anyway, he came back in with a swollen up face, and we said, oh, well, there we go, that's life. And, he could still breathe and he could still eat and all the rest of it. So his face will go down and he'll be fine. But I was later on, out and about on my farm, and I was giving my horses some hay. And as one of the horses walked past a particular bush on the farm, it just erupted into just this cloud. And I stood back and I said, whoa, what is that? And I said, I know what that is. It was a bee swarm. And the horse was not harmed. It didn't sting the horse. They're quite docile bees. And but anyway, I stood there just in amazement watching this bee swarm fly in this cloud, just around and around and around and around, keeping my distance and keeping alert, because that sort of bee swarm can quickly turn and it can kill you. And, this is what you've got to be aware of when you see a bee swarm. They can be really, really dangerous. But anyway, I stood there in amazement just watching it, and I sort of thought, well, I better find somewhere else to give the hay to the horses. And so I gave them the hay over that way, and I came back, and it had settled back down into the same bush that it was in the first place, and I saw it, and it was probably just a little bit smaller than a football, which is typical for a bee swarm. And you would think that there was, a lot more space in a bee swarm, given how big they are. When they are flying around and around and around and around in the air, they can be really, really impressive, and yet they can come back down into a space just a little bit smaller than an American football. And so I said, wow, that's quite a swarm. And after a while, it settled down, and, I was able to get quite close and have a look at it, and I said, gee, that's a nice, healthy swarm. And, they were sort of all talking to each other, and Queenie apparently had a big conference with the rest of the worker bees that were with her. And because I'll explain about a bee swarm. Bee swarms happen usually on warm spring or summer days, okay? And typically this time of year or maybe a bit later. And what happens is one or more queens hatches, and there's already a queen in the hive, and usually there's a battle for dominance, and one of the queens has to leave because there can only be one queen in a hive. And she will take a proportion of the worker bees with her. and there will be some drones with the worker bees, and they'll fly around, often quite high in the air, sometimes 100 feet or more high in the air. And the queen will mate with the drone, and I'm going to explain the biology of it. So if anyone's, squeamish about this, then, just tune out for about 30 seconds. After the drone has mated with the queen, he leaves a portion of his anatomy inside the queen, which continues to function. And that is why a queen bee can live for a very long time and continue making little baby bees, because she has the genitals of the drone inside her, and they're still functioning, and they get incorporated into her anatomy. It's a fascinating process, and of course the drone dies because he's been disemboweled. But that's bee biology. That's how they do it. And so after she has mated, she settles somewhere, generally in a conveniently placed bush, to rest for a time, and she sends her workers out to find a new hive site. And if you do not capture the swarm, they're likely to make the hive anywhere, in a hollow tree, in a roof, in a ceiling, underneath your car, wherever happens to be convenient for them. So if you're already somebody who has bees, and if you have a spare hive, it's a really good idea to capture the swarm and put it in the hive, instead of either losing it out into the forest somewhere as a wild swarm, or waking up and finding that they've made it in the top of your laundry ceiling cavity or something like that, which is likely to happen. So anyway, I was sitting there, I was watching the swarm, and after about 15 minutes, the whole football of bees just took wing at one instant, just went whoom, and just circled and circled and circled and circled and circled, went back to where the original hive was, which is a bee box. Okay, this is an actual proper hive that I have on my land, and I haven't really ever used it for honey, but I have it for pollination purposes, for pollinating trees and such, like fruit trees. And so they circled and circled and circled, and had to think about going back to the original hive. But, the bees that had just booted them out, they were still fairly active on guard duty, and they were swarming around the entrance, so they obviously thought better of that. And then they went and they circled and circled and circled until they landed on another bush. And this is typical bee swarm behavior. And I sort of noticed where they were, and I said, aha. And although it was a more difficult bush for me to get to, it was still possible. And I thought, I'm going to capture that swarm, but not now. I just took a note of where it was, and I got all the stuff ready. And I'd like to continue telling the story, because I think that it's instructive for people to see that this is how beekeepers capture a swarm. Well, this is how I capture a swarm anyway.
Yeah, this is a great lesson. We'll be right back. Guineith is teaching us about bee swarms and capturing bee swarms. Guineith, please continue.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, I just noticed where the bees were, okay, and what bush they were in. And what I did was, over the course of the afternoon, I would go and I would get a particular piece of kit. And then I would just very carefully approach the bee swarm and put the piece of kit, like, for instance, a pair of long-handled loppers to lop the branch, or actually I had to end up lopping down. It wasn't a very tall bush, so I ended up lopping down the whole bush. But I had the loppers, and I put the loppers next to the bush, and a little a handle with spade. Okay, there was a broken spade without a handle that I could use to scoop up underneath the bee swarm. Because it had they had landed on this tiny little bush and it had killed the whole bush over, and it was the swarm was sitting on the ground. And that's what I mean when I say it's not ideal. It's much easier to capture a bee swarm when it's in a tree, okay? Because then you can often cut off the branch with a sack underneath it and just close up the top of the sack. You can often do that, but when it's on the ground, obviously you can't do that. So I got the spade with the handleless spade, and just going back, just gradually over the process of the afternoon. So there's nothing too spooky, nothing too scary, nothing too sudden going on. And if I noticed that they were going through a period of increased activity for whatever reason, I just backed off. Because you've got to treat bee swarms with a huge amount of respect, because people get killed by bee swarms, okay? Because they, when one of them begins to sting, and, when it can set off a pheromone reaction with the whole swarm, and the whole swarm can end up stinging you, and then you are in very, very serious trouble, because there's maybe 5,000 of them and one of you, and that's not a good look. Like I say, they can kill people. They do kill people all the time, or at least they send people to the emergency department. So bees, this is it. You get the pieces and you put them near the swarm, one at a time. And the other thing I did was I made up a bucket. I actually do have a smoker, but I didn't really know where it was, and I wasn't of a mind to go looking for it. So what I did was I got a metal bucket, and I made a makeshift smoker out of the metal bucket, which is like a 2.5-gallon metal bucket. So you put hot coals in the bottom of the bucket. If you haven't got access to a smoker, this is what you can do. You get a 2.5-gallon bucket, metal bucket, and you put hot coals in the bottom of the bucket, and then you get some kind of combustible small sticks. Make a little bit of a fire. Get the hot coals burning quite well. And then you put some damp hay, not soaking wet hay, but damp hay on top of the fire. And it will make a good amount of smoke. But you've got to watch it. You've got to be careful. And obviously using a proper smoker is better, okay? But like I say, I couldn't quite locate my proper smoker, so I said, well, this is what I'll do. And in many parts of the world because people keep bees, have kept bees, or have eaten honey in every culture all over the world, and it's only in the West that we came up with bee suits, proper hives, I'm talking about the box-shaped hives with the supers and the brooder boxes and all that, and the queen excluders and all of that, okay? Only in the West. And if you go to other parts of the world, you'll find they have different ways of beekeeping. And usually they don't have veils. Usually they don't have veils. Usually they just have a scarf over their head. And, but not necessarily.
Hold on, we'll be right back. We're talking about, it's hard to get the truth today. And we heard at the bottom of the hour news that gas prices are up, crude is up, and the news just said that Oklahoma has the lowest gas prices in the country, $1.76. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. GasBuddy.com will tell you that the price in Springfield, Missouri, 60 or so miles from our farm, is $1.44.9. So you really can't believe everything that you hear, see, or read, believe it or not. It's really, really frustrating. Guineith, we were talking about bees, and you were talking about capturing a swarm, etc. Please continue. And then I have a question for you about mud wasps or mud daubers after you talk about bees in your neck of the woods.
We have those here too. I don't know if it's the same species, but it's probably a similar one. Anyway, then what I did was once I had everything lined up, I walked away and I let them be, because I have learned that the very best time to do any beekeeping is the middle of the night. Okay? I know that a lot of beekeepers, handle their bees in the middle of the day or at various times, but I've got a confession to make. I'm a bit frightened of bees. Although I've kept bees for, since the boys were really little, I've had bees. I've bought hives. I've kept hives. Even when I was living in the suburbs, I had a beehive. But I've also been attacked by bees. And because of that, let's just say I have the utmost respect for them. And I think that if anybody says that they are not a little bit frightened of bees, then they don't know what they're talking about. Okay? That's my personal opinion. And I have the greatest respect for them, and but I don't take them for granted, And I've found that the safest time to handle bees is the middle of the night, personally. And for light, what I use is the real light off a bicycle, a red light, because bees can't see red very well. I've had them investigate. They can see that there's something there, because I've had them in the middle of the night fly up to the bike light and investigate and say, "Oh, what's this?" But it's not in an aggressive way. It's just sort of like, what's this? I haven't seen one of these before, kind of thing. And but I know that if I put a white light on there, that it would probably wake the hive up, whereas a red light will not wake the hive up. And you can do your beekeeping with a relative degree of safety. And, so anyway, what I did was probably about 12:15. This is just a couple of hours ago. I woke up 12:15 our time, because the broadcast starts at 2 a.m. our time. So I woke up and I got my boots on and I taped up with, I call them horse bandages. They're a self-adhesive type of pressure bandage that you get from the horse supply shop, and they're actually for putting on horse legs, but I use them for a lot of other things too. I use them for sealing up my cuffs and my trouser cuffs when I don't want things like potassium hydroxide and bees to get into my clothing. And a lot of beekeepers wear gloves. I don't wear gloves. And they wear veils. I don't wear a veil, but I wear a scarf over my head, hijab style. So I think everybody knows what I'm talking about, round the neck, wrapped, and so that it's just my face showing. So my neck is covered, my hair is covered, and it's just my face. And I have a very good reason for not wearing a veil. I used to wear a veil, and then one day I was handling my bees. This was back when I was in the suburbs, and the bees got angry at me for some reason. And they found a way inside the veil, and they began a mass sting attack. And the ones that were in the veil told the ones that were outside what was happening and called for reinforcements. And to cut a very long story short, I ended up in the emergency department. And, you know, I had my cell phone there. I dialed 000, which is our emergency number. I'd explained that what had happened, that I'd been stung multiple times in the neck with bees, and the ambulance, thankfully, was there within minutes. But on that day, here's another beekeeping tip, and I couldn't find it this afternoon, so I decided to pray instead, which I'm somebody who prays a lot, so I just decided that I was just going to pray to God and believe that God was going to be with me. But I usually like to have Zyrtec on standby, and this is why. Somebody told me that if you are ever attacked by bees, this is not medical advice. This is a modern folk remedy, okay? So you should not do what I say. So I'm just saying this is what I did. I downed within about 5 minutes 3/4 of a bottle, or probably about 75 mils of Zyrtec within about 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And that probably saved my life because it stopped an anaphylactic reaction in my throat, which would have suffocated me. Now, like I said, I do not advise that people do that. Okay? But in my case, at that time, it probably saved my life. And when the ambulance guy got there and found out what I'd done, he was quite annoyed at me, because that's not the recommended dosage of Zyrtec. And I said, well, I'm still alive and I probably wouldn't be otherwise. And he had to sort of grunt and agree that that was probably true. But like I say, I'm absolutely not recommending that anybody does that. But personally, I like to have Zyrtec on hand when I'm doing my beekeeping, just in case something goes wrong again. Because that is largely, and for many years, that's what gave me a real fear of bees. And I am getting over it. I'm getting more confident again in my beekeeping. Okay, and so handling the swarm today was a huge step forward in my beekeeping. And but anyway, I taped up my cuffs and my trouser cuffs with horse bandages. I put loose sweater on, okay, loose jumpsuit sweater on, tights, and then jeans over the tights, and, and this is how I dress, but like I say, no veil. For that reason, and I lit up my bucket smoker, and I had a bucket of water on hand next to the smoker in case anything went wrong. Because when you're doing this sort of thing, you're handling fire, you're handling creatures that are venomous and that can swarm and that can do a lot of damage if they get angry. You've got to treat them with respect, and you've just got to try and, like I say, you need to pray. And this is what people all over the world say. When you're doing beekeeping, you need to pray and you need to maintain a calm attitude. And if you do that, then the bees sense that and they're less inclined to attack. So thankfully this was quite a docile swarm, and I was able to get in there with my tree loppers, cut down the tiny little bush that they had decided that they were going to claim, and I got the shovel without a handle, the spade, and I got it and I scooped up the swarm, and I had, beforehand, I located the hive in the position that I wanted it to be next to the swarm. and I put in the frames. I cleaned up the frames. I had an old hive on hand, so I cleaned it out. I cleaned up the frames, and I put them in position beforehand. But it had this particular box has an 8-frame capacity, but I only put 4 of the frames in. So the space for the other 4 frames, I said, well, I'll put the swarm in there, and then the bees will migrate into the frames when they see the frames, because they've just come out of this sort of hive, so they know what to do. And you shut up the front of the hive, so you shut the front door of the hive, and you have the excluder, and you have the lid, you have everything ready. So you lop off the little bush that they're on, you scoop it up, and then you just put it straight into the box, put the queen excluder on, put the lid on, and take a deep sigh of relief. And that's how I capture a bee swarm. And then after I've had a bit of a sigh of relief, I go back and check the place. And if I can see that there's any more bees clumping around, I see if I can pick them up and very quickly put them in the bee box as well. And any tiny little clumps that are left at the end of it, when I open the bee box up, probably late tomorrow afternoon, when they're all settled in, then those bees, they'll either go back to the original hive, which they'll probably be rejected from, or they will, when I open up the hive tomorrow afternoon, then they'll find their own way into the hive, because bees are very good at communicating with each other. But the sticks, I will remove them when the bees have settled into the frame. So when the frames, when the bees have settled into the frames, I'll open up the lid, I'll take off the queen excluder, and then I'll remove the bits of twig and brush that the bees were on.
Yeah, I've been thinking about bees for quite a long time, class. And we have some bees that are right by one of our doors, where you enter the house. And we could relocate them, or we can leave them there. Now, what's the advantage of leaving a swarm of bees, a nest of bees, a beehive, right by a door where people would want to come into our house? What would be the advantage of that? I don't know. I guess if someone didn't know they were there and made some noise, they would be stung. I guess that would be the advantage. And I was thinking back to a story that I was reading, it was probably decades ago, about an armored car robbery. And these guys wanted to get into an armored car and get, when they used to use cash, the cash out of it. And so how do you do that? How do you convince the guys inside, behind the bulletproof glass, behind the bulletproof, grills on the engine, behind those tires that are bulletproof? How do you get them to open up voluntarily that armored car? Well, from what I've learned, what people have done in the past is they've taken some bees and collected them and let them through the air vent into the armored car box. They got these little vents, and so they just got these bees in like a jar, and they took the lid off and kind of tapped the jar, and the bees said that's enough. They left the jar, went into the armored car, swarmed around, and the guys in it voluntarily opened the doors and ran out of the truck. Yeah,
as you would. I'm not absolutely terrified of bees anymore. It's now at a healthy respect, which is probably appropriate. But like I say, it's you've got to be aware that these creatures, at the least, they can really, really hurt. And but people do some people have bee sting allergies. I don't really have a bee sting allergy, which is handy to not have one. But if you get enough of them, and enough of them, especially in areas like on the face and on the neck, then they can cause you serious damage, because they can cause an anaphylactic shock, which will block your windpipe, which will swell your windpipe so that it shuts, and that will suffocate you within minutes. And that's what the danger was of before, when I was wearing the veil, and I had bees, and they found their way into the veil, and they called all their friends and told their friends where the gap was. And this is something that people have to be aware of. If they choose to wear veils when handling bees, the veils don't always work. They do. The bees are very determined little creatures, and they do sometimes find their way into the veil. And when they do, it's really, really uncomfortable for the poor old beekeeper, because the bee can't find its way out.
It seems as if bees have a communications network that only takes a second or two for one to communicate with the rest. It's that fast.
Yeah. They call their friends. They absolutely do.
Do you have carpenter bees in Australia?
What are they?
They're kind of yellowish. They have, they bore holes about 1/4 of an inch in diameter, and they'll find some wood. So if you have some wood in your house, they'll just drill a hole right through it. Looks like a perfect hole. Looks like something that you would make with almost a precision drill. And they'll go in through the siding of the house, the trim of the house, and they'll find a cavity in the wall, and they'll set up house, inside where it's nice and warm. Do you have those?
No, but we have paper wasps, and we have mud wasps.
Okay.
These paper wasps, they're also called European wasps. And they have a very brightly striped black and yellow body, and they're around about probably a little bit bigger than a honeybee. So probably about every paper wasp is probably around about the same size as a queen bee. So, they're called European wasps or paper wasps. We have those, and we have mud wasps.
Okay, mud wasps and mud daubers. Those are synonyms, mud wasp, mud daubers. We have them here at the farm, and what they do is they look for, once it rains or there's a puddle somewhere and they can scoop up some mud, they will build a tubular-looking nest, if you will, and they'll bring a spider or two in there, and the spider might lay eggs, and then when the mud wasps hatch, they eat the spiders. And so, it's almost a self-contained birthing type of a situation. And it's really interesting, or hatching situation. But it's a nuisance because there's these mud tubes all over the place, and they're prolific in Virginia and Missouri. Guineith and I will be right back after the top of the hour commercial announcements and news. We'll be talking about chickens and nickel-iron batteries. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. If you heard the top of the hour news, you probably heard something like the UK is going to ban new gasoline-powered cars by 2030. Sounds like a long way off. That's 10 years away. I'm stunned. And so Boris Johnson made this pledge, his prime minister, that as part of a plan for a green industrial revolution, they're going to create 250,000 jobs in energy, transport, and technology. Well, absolutely, they could. Because to switch over from gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles to electric-powered vehicles, they're going to have to build some infrastructure. they're going to have to put these charging stations in everywhere. The problem is we don't have enough electricity to charge all these vehicles that run on gasoline and diesel power. And if you remember, the UK, those are the guys who said, boy, we really want to encourage you to switch to diesel, clean diesel, because you can get more efficiency out of a diesel engine than you can out of a gasoline engine. That's absolutely true. You can. But then they decided that they were choking because of all the diesel cars, and diesels aren't as clean as they appeared to think they were. And the problem with diesels is they smell. So there's a technology that cleans up the smell. But, the good thing about diesel is that the particles that come out of the exhaust pipe of the older diesels, it would be black and sooty, but it would fall down to the earth quickly, within a couple hours. The new gasoline-powered engines, the particles are so tiny they stay airborne for months. So there's this belief that just because what you can't see is okay. It's not okay. So what we should be doing, in my opinion, is making vehicles more efficient. More efficient. Okay? Now, the government, do you think that they have catalytic converters on their fleet? Do you think that they have catalytic converters on their tanks and aircraft and helicopters? Do you think President Trump has a catalytic converter on his jet? How about his helicopter? You think so? The answer is no. And we don't have catalytic converters on military vehicles either. We don't have catalytic converters on the bombs and the projectiles and the explosives that we detonate. Yeah. When we beat up little countries. So, again, it's the little guy who bears the brunt of these government whims and wishes. As for me, I don't know of anything other than nuclear energy that has more density of energy per unit of mass than gasoline. Well, actually, diesel. Diesel's number one. Gasoline might be number two. Propane or liquefied natural gas might be number three in terms of energy portability and density. So the reason we use diesel and gasoline, the reason our farm tractors use diesel is because there's no gasoline-powered engine that is that powerful that can run those tractors. That's why we use diesel. Diesel has more energy per unit of mass than gasoline. Diesel engines last longer. I've had a tractor that's 1974. 84, 94, 04, 14. That's 46 years old. It's almost 50 years old. It's a diesel. Yeah. And you can even buy them on Craigslist. You can search Ford 3000, Ford 3000 tractor, and you'll see what it looks like. It's blue. And you can buy them, and you can buy parts for them. But once, my forecast is once the United Kingdom decides that, okay, that's it for new gasoline-powered and diesel-powered vehicles, you will have a real tough time getting parts for them. Because who wants to make parts for something that there are going to be fewer of every year? That's going to be a problem. So this plan will probably force people into buying these electric vehicles. And then if they decide they don't want you to drive, no problem. Just shut down the grid. Or there'll be software that they can send wirelessly to your vehicle that says, no, we're not going to let you charge it today. How about that? Or they can say, you know what? We're not going to let you unlock your car today. You can't get in it anymore until we say so. I really like a vehicle that has gasoline or diesel, that has a key that you put the key in the lock cylinder. You turn it, a quarter of a turn, and then it unlocks the door. I like an ignition key that you put the key in the ignition. It doesn't have a battery. It doesn't have a transponder. It's not electronic. It's just a plain old switch. I kind of like that. My kind of on tangent here. But my first car was really not a car, it was a truck. My first vehicle that I owned, that I bought, was $675. It was a four-wheel drive Willys, Willys, Jeep with a snowplow and a lift, to raise and lower the snowplow. Four-wheel drive. And I used the snowplow to pay for the Jeep. And,
wow.
It was a business as a teenager. I had a little business and plowed snow with my car, which was a truck. And if you want to see what this Jeep looked like, you can go watch Combat, that TV series that I've been telling you about from the 1960s. My Jeep was a newer model than the one they had in World War II. And the only difference was that mine had a hood that was like 2 inches taller. Same square shape, same lights, same seats, same dash, same everything. Except the hood was a little taller because instead of a flathead 4-cylinder engine, it had a F-head. So 4 of the valves were in the head, 4 of the valves were in the block. So they needed to raise the hood just for that clearance. Other than that, it looked virtually identical. And to the untrained eye, you'd say it was a World War II Jeep. So what I'm saying is simple is really kind of nice. It really is. Complicated is really a problem. And we're getting more complicated. And this thing really bothers me because it seems to me that they will be able to control, those ubiquitous the ruling elite, the controllers of we the villagers, they will be able to control where you go because they can put transponders in cars and they can say, you know what? I think that guy didn't pay his parking meter fee. So shut down that car. It doesn't matter where it is, just shut it down. They send the signal to the satellite. The satellite sends it back down and the car stops. I think that's where we're going. And I don't like it. And that's not going to work with my truck because my truck doesn't understand those signals. And neither does my car. And that's where I want to be. I don't want people unlocking my vehicle remotely. I don't want them starting my vehicle remotely. I don't want them calling my vehicle and say, yo, wherever you are, come here. And have this vehicle automatically start up from a parking place around the block and go to wherever they want it to go. Maybe on a flatbed truck and then haul it away and steal it that way. I don't want that to happen. And it's not going to happen with my trucks and cars and tractors because they're not smart enough to come when they're called. Guineith, any comments?
Yeah, as soon as I heard that about the smart vehicles, my first thought was how monumentally stupid is that? Because actually it takes more energy to run an electric vehicle than what it takes to run a diesel-powered or petrol-powered or propane-powered vehicle. Because you have to use some sort of energy to generate the electricity, and then you get a charge, and then you get a loss through the transmission of the electricity, even if it's just a few meters, even if you have your own solar power system. I've had an electric trike, okay? It's still out there, but needs a new battery. I'll get to fixing it one day. That's job number 674 on the list. Okay, it's quite a way down the list. My thought is that people forget that the nobility in England, that is the people who run the show in England, okay, to this day, still all know how to ride horses. And many of them still have carriages. Like, for instance, I don't know, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has quite a collection of carriages. So she's going to be fine. Whether or not she's, or when it comes to the time when she passes on, as she will inevitably at some stage, then it will be King William, And then King William will have his fleet of horse-drawn carriages. every nobleman and every noblewoman in England, every member of the aristocracy and blue blood class, they all, practically all, know how to ride horses because it is a part of their childhood education. And many of them own horses, especially if they live on country estates. And I think that, they're going to say, well, we might have an electric car sitting in the garage because, whatever. But we also have the option of riding our horses to get from A to B. And I think that this is where it's going. And my other thought of this is, what are they going to do about all the agricultural machinery that needs to be out there? Are they going to go back to horse-drawn agricultural machinery? And this is a technology that's almost dead. That there might be, 10 or 20 teams of, horse-drawn farm teams in the whole of the UK. How are they going to harvest their crops? How are they going to sow their crops? How are they going to plough their fields, without diesel engines? Or are they going to make an exception? Or are they going to say, we'll run, electric-powered ploughs? You can't do that because ploughs, harvesters, all of these equipment, they need such an energy density to do the work that they need to do. You cannot practically run these on an electric system. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Right.
As a farmer.
Absolutely. And I'll share a little bit more when we come back. We'll be right back.
Yep.
So, we think that Elon Musk, this brilliant inventor, invented the electric vehicle. That's not true. In 1859, that's 1859, the lead-acid battery was invented. And by a few years later, 1881, there were significant improvements, and the electric, the battery, the lead-acid battery that was rechargeable, began being made on an industrial scale. By that year, there was an early electric vehicle, 1881. Then 7 years later, 1888, there was a more of a practical type electric kind of car, and it was it looked like an open air stagecoach. In 1899, there were electric cabs on the streets of Washington, D.C. By 1904, there was a real practical, rechargeable battery electric car. I saw it. I happened to be in a museum, and there it was. So when you think of Elon Musk and all of his great achievements, what he does is he capitalizes on others' technologies. Space launches, tunneling machines that drill holes into the ground, the electric vehicle, things like that. He didn't invent any of this. The concepts were already in place, and others have done the groundbreaking work. But this thought that the electric vehicle is going to save you, not true. As a matter of fact, I was reading a story about charging stations, these superchargers, where you can charge quickly your vehicle, your electric vehicle in Australia, where Guineith is right now. And it costs more per mile to drive a vehicle like a BMW, an electric vehicle as compared to a BMW. So it costs more to drive one of these electric vehicles. Now, forget the cost of the electric vehicle being really high. I'm just talking about the cost per mile for the energy to move that thing. Costs more if you use a supercharger. Now, you could have a solar array that Guineith does and I do, and you could charge your vehicle, for free, assuming you own the solar system. And you could charge it for like a couple weeks and get enough charge to go to town. And maybe enough charge to get back. But if you think that you can, stick some solar cells on on the skin of your vehicle and you can just drive forever because you'll be charging while you're driving. That's nonsense. There's not enough real estate on the vehicle's skin to put enough solar panels to charge with any significant amount to get you there and back. It's not going to happen. So I think these electric cars are I think they're toys. They're absolutely toys. And, when it comes time for an overhaul, which is let's pull out that battery bank. Are you going to do that? Do you have the crane to get that battery bank out of the car? Take the car apart? Do you have that? Or do you just throw away that car because, it's 7 years and the battery's shot? Or do you spend $8 to $10 or $12,000 to get a new battery bank? Because, it only lasts that long. I mean, does anybody think about this? If I were in a showroom and I were looking at a $60,000 or $70,000 vehicle, I would have the question, so tell me about the maintenance. Oh, you don't have to worry about that. Never? 7 years, but that's so far away, you don't have to worry about that. And what happens in 7 years? Well, you'll need a new battery. That's all? Just a new battery? Yeah. How much do they cost? Oh, I don't know, $8, $10, $12, maybe $15,000. The next words out of my mouth would probably be, you're out of your mind. I'm not doing that. So what happens? People rent these things or they lease them because they can't face what happens next when that battery goes dead. Gwyneth, any comments? Did we lose Gwyneth? I don't know. Gwyneth, are you there? Well, I'll tell you what. Let's reconnect with Gwyneth during this bottom of the hour break. And let's talk about chickens when she comes back. Your dial is set to USA Prepares. I'm Vincent Finelli. And we're just a bunch of volunteers teaching things that we think you might be interested in learning. And exposing the holes in the alleged practicality of the electric car, the modern electric car. And we need to talk about chickens, Gwyneth, but can you spend a few minutes? I think you know what it's like to be without electricity. And if you have an electric-powered car and you don't have electricity, you're not going anywhere.
That's right. Not only that, didn't they just shut all their lead mines about 20 years ago?
About 5 years ago. About 5 years ago, Barry Soetoro in the United States.
UK.
Yeah, well, there was a Doe Run lead mine right around our neck of the woods. And it provided a lot of lead that was used in the wars, like projectile lead, bullets.
Yeah.
And Barry thought that we don't need any lead. So it's so dangerous to the environment. He got the mines shut down. Barry. Yeah. And by the way, that's the material that's used in car batteries. That's the material that's used in lots of things. Lots of things.
Yeah, it's
like
used
wheel
in the
weights.
type of cycle batteries that you get in electric cars, funnily enough.
So, why don't you tell us what it's like?
Well, it's like this. We no longer have a problem with the polarity of our battery, but even if you've got a nickel-iron battery, okay, which has the greatest longevity of any type of electric battery, you've got to change the electrolyte about every 10 years. And then it's a whole process of getting the charge back into the battery after you've changed over the electrolyte, which can be a really, really prolonged process. It's something where it just, you can't rush this. I suppose if you had a generator, you might be able to, hang on, that's a diesel engine, and we've just banned diesel engines, haven't we? You know, these people have not thought this through. Once you have changed the electrolyte, you just have to wait for that battery just to charge up to a certain level and to get its memory back of what it's supposed to do. And once it's got its memory back, it's all good and it's all fine, you know. But until that time, it's just each day is a little bit better than the last. And you just try to put as little stress on the battery as possible, which means that you can't run the inverter when you've just changed over the electrolyte. You may be able to charge a cell phone or two, which is why I can do the radio broadcast now, because I was able to charge my cell phone this afternoon. And I think that within a week, it'll probably be all good to go. It'll probably be just about back to normal within about a week. But trying to explain to my son that he can't charge his cell phone and his tablet and his this and that and the other, because we need every single little ounce of electricity of those 3,000 watts of solar panels just to get the batteries charged. You know, they don't understand this. They have closed all their mines in the UK. Where are they going to get the lead from for all these batteries that they're going to have for these deep cycle batteries for these electric cars? And even if they decide to say, oh, well, lithium, where are they going to get the lithium? It's just changed to another element. You can't just say, oh, we'll make some lithium. No, you can't just make lithium. It's an element. It's the third element on the periodic table after hydrogen and helium. And there's a thing about elemental substances. You can't just make them because they're atoms. Okay? So you can't. You have to mine them out of the ground somewhere, or you have to obtain them from some compound, okay, or usually a combination of the two. These people have not thought this through. They are, and of course, you can see the solution that's going to come down the track. Oh, we'll just buy the lead off of China. Really? Then you've just enslaved yourself to China for all eternity, you know, and now China has you by the neck, and they can decide what happens to your economy on the turn of a dime, as you say in America. They have not thought this through. Boris Johnson has not thought this through. He's always come across as a bit of a fop, which means, we will just do this, or we will just do that, you know, and the type of person who really doesn't think about things too deeply, who just decides they're going to do something without thinking what to do, how to do it. And I can tell you that if I had decided to just go out and capture that bee swarm this afternoon, it would not have gone well. I can tell you that right now. If you're going to plan to do anything, okay, if you're going to plan to buy and break in a horse or plow a field or, you know, raise some cattle or whatever you decide to do in your life, you have to have a good think, and you have to sit down and you have to take account of all of the various ins and outs and what can go wrong, and I better prepare for this eventuality or that eventuality, you know, that you've got to do that. And, you know, Boris Johnson clearly has not thought about this. He's just had somebody come to him and says, this will be a good idea, this will win you lots of votes. And I can tell you, Boris Johnson, this will crash your economy. Maybe that's your intention in the first place. Maybe you really are a sellout. Maybe you really are a traitor to your own country. You know, I really, the more time goes on, the more I think that actually is the case, that he is a traitor to the whole British people. You know, and I think that people I think that ordinary British people are going to figure out how the cow is going to eat the cabbage, because there's a lot of people of my age and older in Britain who remembered when the mines shut in Britain, tin mines, coal mines, lead mines. Britain has such a wealth of mineral resources. That is what enabled it to launch on the whole world and form an empire. You know, the fact that Britain has vast lead deposits enabled it to become a mighty military power, because they didn't have to go anywhere else except their own shores for the lead. This is it. And you can't have a military without lead. It doesn't work. And you might say, oh, yeah, depleted uranium. Well, yeah, if you want to poison the whole world forever. And lead is poisonous too, but lead in its ordinary form is not radioactive. So depleted uranium, you can make projectiles out of it, but it's far worse for the land that you capture than lead is, because you actually turn the whole landscape radioactive. You know, they haven't thought about this.
Right. In the mid 1970s, the government of the United States decided that they were going to do something to protect people in automobiles. And there was a ruling that came down that automobile manufacturers would have to have bumpers. These used to be these chrome-plated steel bumpers. They had to be able to absorb a 5-mile-an-hour impact without damaging the vehicle. Like the headlights would still work, you know, with a 5 mile an hour impact. Now, 5 miles an hour is like walking, literally. Okay. And the automobile manufacturers had such a difficult time making a bumper because the government said you will be able to sustain a 5 mile an hour impact without damaging the headlights and the grille. Well, they really couldn't do it. That meant that all the bumpers, now think about this, that means all the bumpers on all the vehicles, trucks, cars have to be the same height, right? And they have to be shaped so that they can sustain this impact. Well, a few years later, they figured out that it really wasn't such a good idea. They couldn't do it. So they had to drop it in 1982 to 2.5 miles an hour, which is way, way less force than 5 miles an hour. It's not half. It's way, way less force. So it's just one example of government saying, oh, here's what we're going to do. It's like this idiot that we've got who ran for state representative. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to lease out the median between the north and south and east and west bound lanes of a highway. So what he wanted to do is take, the highway and, all that grass that's in between. What a pain it is to cut that, right? So he wanted to lease that to farmers. Let them go out there with their hay mowers and their hay rakes and their hay balers and let them cut the grass. And we'll lease it to them. So not only will they do all the work for the government, but they will pay the government for the hay. What this moron didn't realize was that's the most toxic, polluted grass outside of Chernobyl. Yeah. And that's what he wanted to feed the cows. Think about 24 hours a day. Trucks, trailers, leaking tanks, all that stuff. Little bits of rubber from the tires as they wear out. All the exhaust pollution, all that right on the grass. And then as the vehicles leak oil, while it rains, the roads are sloped so that the oil runs onto the grass. The grass catches the oil, the water, and it's a filter. And it stays in the filter. And so what we do is we bundle that grass up, feed it to cows, get milk from the cows, get beef from the cows. You get your daily allotment of pollution from McDonald's when you eat their beef. The children get it if they went to school and had milk with their lunch, if they went to school. This is the kind of lack of science that we have in our government. These guys run for office and they've got no clue. And I remember talking to a Missouri state representative, and he voted to turn corn into fuel at way more cost, at way less efficiency than gasoline. And I looked that guy square in the eye and I said, did you ever take a science class? Did you? Those are the people who are telling us what to do. No clue. Except they do know how to take bribes. They do know how to do that. Guineith and I'll be right back. Guineith, do you want to talk about chickens when we come back? Guineith is with us. Guineith, I just have a couple very quick comments. Class, paper products are disappearing off store shelves across the country. Where that would be, evidence is in Washington State, California, Virginia, Indiana, Ohio, New Jersey, New York, Michigan, and Missouri. And if you're thinking about buying long-term storage foods, semi-long, like dry spaghetti in boxes, I suggest you avoid the Aldi and Walmart's Great Value brand of traditional spaghetti, because our experience is it grows bugs before the best buy date. As a matter of fact, we returned some to Aldi, and our return caused a national, I'm talking about the Finelli family, we caused a national removal from the shelves of pasta from Aldi because we showed them. We said, looky here, bugs in sealed boxes. Okay. So same thing with Walmart's Great Value. Now maybe it's made in the same factory. I don't know. Next very quick thing, Springfield, Missouri. The doctors, the administration of the hospitals in Springfield are asking the government of the state, corrupt state of Missouri, for a mask ordinance. The hospital, one hospital has added 32 or is adding 32 more rooms for COVID. And they're going to put probably 2 people in a room. That's 72 more treatment room beds for COVID. They are already full at capacity right now. So for those of you who think that the coronavirus is fake and fraud, all you have to do is read the internet and you will see that it's out of control. And the panic is now in again for toilet paper, food, disinfectants, as 40 states have record daily increases in coronavirus cases. 20 states have reported an all-time high. Now, whether you believe this is real or not, the corona panic is absolutely here. Guineith, you had some comments to make?
Yeah, just quickly, cascading domino effect. I've always said that. It's more of an issue than any disease itself. You need to be concerned about the cascading domino effect. But what you were saying earlier about politicians, back in the day, okay, I mean, before the 20th century, if you were not a big business owner, you could not be a politician, okay, because politicians did not get salaries in most places prior to the 20th century. Did you know that? People forget that, but that's actually true. So unless you were a, really big business owner who could afford to, take 6 months out of your year and just go and sit somewhere and help to run things, then you didn't get to do so. I think that's why over the last 4 years, America has actually had a lot of success, is because for the first time in almost 100 years, you have had a business magnate running the show. Somebody who has You know, I mean, he got a bit of a start from his father. You know, he was born into a business household, let's just say. And when his father died, he left him $50 million. But he didn't waste that $50 million. Instead, Donald Trump invested it and used it to establish businesses. And yes, he failed a few times, but he eventually turned that $50 million into $500 million. And that is kudos to him, basically. And the problem that we have, more than just about anything else, is that we have people running the show who have never had to run anything in the real world. Okay? They've never had a farm. They've never been entrepreneurs and set up businesses from scratch. And most of them have never even done anything, you know, which is, as far as I'm concerned, this is the bottom feeder of entrepreneurship, is stock trading. Okay? Stock traders, in my humble opinion, are the bottom feeder level of entrepreneurship. But nevertheless, I tried stock trading and I failed miserably at it. I was no good at it. And if somebody can make a lot of money trading stocks, then they have a skill. They really have an ability there, because not everybody can do it, and I certainly can't do it. This is it. They've never had to plan anything. They've never had to run anything, and they're trying to run our lives.
Yeah, they are. And I have 2 degrees in finance and economics, and I'm here to tell you, unless you have an inside track, you're not going to make it. Guineith, thank you so much.